I smiled when I handed her those keys. It felt like the right thing to do, the generous thing, the smart thing, and that smile is the part I keep coming back to now, because of everything I got wrong that year. The smile might have been the worst of it. Not the signing, not the trust. The smile. The pure, uncomplicated pride of a man who believed he was finally doing right by his family. My name is Gerald Pruitt. I'm 74 years old. Spent 38 years as a licensed electrician in Chattanooga, Tennessee. The kind of work where one wrong connection burns a house down and you never forget that. I retired in 2019 with a clean record, both hands still working, and $312,000 in a retirement account. I'd built the slow, honest way, $30 here, $50 there, decades of choosing the responsible thing over the easy one. My wife Dorothy had been a kindergarten teacher at Orchard Knob Elementary for 31 years, taught reading to children whose own parents couldn't read. She retired the same year I did, and we had plans. Not big ones. A trip to see the Smoky Mountains in the fall when the leaves turn. A kitchen renovation she'd been drawing on napkins since 1997. Time. Just quiet, ordinary time together. Then, in the spring of 2021, Dorothy started forgetting things. Small things at first. The word for the remote control, whether she'd taken her blood pressure pill, the name of the neighbor's dog she'd greeted every morning for 6 years. I told myself it was stress. I told myself it was sleep. I told myself everything a husband tells himself when he is not ready for what is actually happening. By that autumn, it was bigger things. She left the stove on twice. She called me by her father's name once and didn't realize she'd done it. The morning she couldn't remember the route to the grocery store she'd driven to every week since 1989, I made the appointment. The neurologist was a woman named Dr. Alderman, over at the Memory Center on Gun Barrel Road. She delivered the news the way professionals do when they've delivered it 1,000 times with care, yes, but also with the practiced steadiness of someone who knows the word dementia, lands like a stone, and there is nothing to do but wait for the ripples to settle. I sat across from her desk, and I heard the words, and I nodded, and I said the right things, whatever they were. I don't remember a single one of them now. What I remember is driving home on Highway 153 with Dorothy quiet in the passenger seat, watching the river through her window, and thinking, I have to figure out how to take care of everything. I have to figure it out right now. Dorothy had a daughter from her first marriage. Philippa, 46 years old, lived up in Nashville in a nice house in Brentwood. Worked in real estate, which meant she understood money and property the way I understand wiring. The vocabulary was second nature. The angles were always visible to her, even when they weren't visible to you. She had her mother's gray eyes and a laugh that could fill a room, and a particular way of leaning forward when she listened that made you feel like the only person who had ever said anything worth hearing. I had always admired Philippa. She was competent in a way that made other people feel safe. And in the weeks after the diagnosis, she was exactly what a daughter was supposed to be. She drove down from Nashville on a Friday and stayed a full week. She sat through Dorothy's follow-up appointments with a legal pad and wrote down every medication, every protocol, every number to call. She organized the pill tray. She updated Dorothy's health records. She drove her to the park on Tuesday and Wednesday mornings and walked slow beside her on the path around the pond while Dorothy pointed at the ducks and remembered for 20 minutes to just be happy. I watched all of this and I felt something shift in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. I felt grateful to the marrow, because Dorothy was slipping and I was terrified, and Philippa had shown up and put both hands on the wheel before I'd even had a chance to ask. 2 months after the diagnosis, she sat across from me at the kitchen table with a folder. I want you to understand what I was that evening. I was a man who had been waking up at 4:45 every morning to make sure Dorothy's first pill was ready before she came fully awake, because on the mornings I was 30 seconds late, she panicked. I was a man who had driven to 3 different pharmacies in the same week, chasing a medication that kept going out of stock. I had not slept more than 5 hours in a row in 2 months. My hands had a tremor I was pretending not to notice. I was running on black coffee and the deep, silent terror of a man who knows the ground is moving under him and cannot find anything solid to hold on to. Philippa set the folder down gently and looked at me with her mother's eyes. I need to talk to you about something practical, she said, and I need you to hear me out before you say anything. She paused. You're 72 years old, Dad. Mom is 68. You are managing everything, the finances, the medications, the appointments, all of it by yourself. And God forbid something happens to you, a fall, a health scare, anything. She would have nothing. Everything is in your name, the accounts, the pension, the house. If you're incapacitated for even a week, she cannot access a single dollar. I stared at the table. These are durable power of attorney documents, she said, opening the folder. Financial and healthcare, both. It just means I can step in if I need to. Handle the bank, the bills, the insurance calls, the paperwork that's eating your whole day so you can put everything you have into her. I am not trying to take anything from you. I am trying to make sure that if something goes wrong, nobody has to wait for a courtroom to figure out what happens to Mom. She slid the pages across to me. She didn't rush. She gave me room. She even said, "Take them to an attorney if you want. Have someone review them. There's no hurry." She said that. I heard her say it. And then I looked down at the papers and I thought about 4:45 in the morning, and I thought about Dorothy calling me by her father's name, and I thought about the stove and the grocery store and 37 other things I was supposed to be handling, and I picked up the pen. I signed them on a Tuesday night. She had them notarized at a UPS store on Lee Highway by Thursday afternoon. She told me about it casually. "The way you mentioned you've already picked up milk, so we don't need to stop." I thanked her. I slept better that night than I had in months. I told myself I had finally done something smart. I told myself I had protected Dorothy. I told myself the weight I'd just felt lift off my back was the weight of good planning. What I had actually done was hand Philippa the key to everything I had ever earned. Run the clock forward 22 months. 22 months of 4:45 alarms. 22 months of pill trays and pharmacy runs and the particular grief of watching someone you've loved for decades lose the threads of herself one by one. First the recent things, then the older things, then the things you thought were carved so deep they couldn't possibly go anywhere. Dorothy forgot the name of the street we lived on. She forgot the names of her grandchildren. She forgot, on a bad Tuesday in February, that we were married. She looked at me across the breakfast table and said politely, "Are you the man who lives here?" I said, "Yes, sweetheart." She seemed satisfied with that and went back to her toast. I sat there and held myself completely still until she couldn't see my face. Through all of it, Philippa was present. She took over the bills entirely. The account correspondence, she said, was just easier if it came to her email. She handled the pension paperwork, the insurance calls, the Medicare resubmissions that could take an entire afternoon to untangle. She checked in by phone 3 or 4 times a week. She drove down from Nashville once a month and sat with Dorothy and held her hand and called her Mom, which Dorothy always responded to, even on the worst days, even when she had forgotten nearly everything else. And then there was a Sunday. My son-in-law, Derek, Philippa's husband, quiet man, works in human resources compliance for a health system up in Nashville, had driven Dorothy and me down to my daughter Renata's place in Chattanooga's North Shore neighborhood for dinner. Renata is my daughter from my first marriage. 41 years old, works as an occupational therapist, has 2 kids in middle school who call Dorothy Grandma Dot and have never once questioned whether she earns the title. Her husband James cooked his mother's brisket recipe. The kids were doing whatever kids do when they think they're invisible, running in and out of the back door, arguing over something on a phone, laughing too loud at something nobody at the adult table was supposed to hear. Dorothy was in the blue cardigan I love on her, having one of her good evenings. She was present in a way that doesn't always happen anymore, laughing at something Renata said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand just because. Those evenings are rarer now and sweeter for it, like warm days in November that you know are borrowed. Philippa was there too. She'd driven down that afternoon. She was doing what she always did in a room, holding court, keeping everyone entertained, refilling glasses before they were empty. If you didn't know what I know now, you would have thought she was the warmest woman alive. I felt Derek's elbow against mine. He slid his phone under the edge of the table and tilted it so I could read the screen without looking like I was reading it. 4 words. Check your pension statement. Then, below it, right now. Don't react. Then, tell them you feel dizzy. I looked up at Derek. He was already looking at Renata, nodding along to something she was saying, his face completely neutral. He didn't glance at me. He didn't need to. He gave one almost imperceptible tilt of the head, the kind that means, "I know, I'm with you, do it." I pulled out my phone. I keep a retirement app on there. Never thought to check it in months because Philippa handled all of it. That was our arrangement, and I opened it under the edge of the table with hands that were not quite steady. The balance was $9,440. I want to be precise about that number because it matters. There had been $312,000 in that account. 41 years old, some of it. Set aside for one reason only: to make sure Dorothy was taken care of when I no longer could. To pay for the memory care facility on Hickson Pike that I had driven past and looked up and quietly priced out and told myself would be there when we needed it. $9,440. Philippa was laughing at her own story at the other end of the table. Her wine glass was nearly empty, and she was already reaching for the bottle. I put my phone face down on my knee. "I'm not feeling right," I said. My voice came out steady, which surprised me. "Something's a little off. I think I need to step outside for a minute." Renata was up before I finished the sentence, worry moving fast across her face. Dorothy reached toward me from her chair. I patted her hand and told her I was fine, just needed air, be right back. Derek was already pushing back from the table, saying he'd walk out with me, give me a hand, no trouble at all. Philippa said something from the end of the table, something warm and solicitous, concern arranged perfectly on her face, and Derek said, "We've got him, don't worry," and had his hand on my elbow, and was steering me toward the door before any other words got said. He didn't walk me around the block. He put me in the passenger seat of his car and drove me to his office at the Health Systems Administrative Building on Amnicola Highway. The building was closed on Sunday. Our footsteps were loud in the lobby and louder in the elevator. He didn't say anything until we were inside his office with the door shut and the overhead light on, which somehow made the room feel both too bright and too cold. He sat across from me. He folded his hands on the desk the way a man does when he's been rehearsing what he's about to say for a long time and is only now allowing himself to say it. "How long have you known?" I asked. 3.5 months, he said. I let that sit. I could hear the ventilation system. I could hear my own breathing. "Why did you wait?" "Because Renata needed to be certain before she watched you learn this, and because I needed every piece documented before there was any chance Philippa could see us coming." He paused. "I did not bring you a hunch, Gerald. I brought you a file." He opened the folder. The withdrawals started 11 days after I signed the power of attorney documents. 11 days. The pattern was the same every time. Between $4,000 and $7,000, never at the same interval, never the same amount, always just under the reporting threshold that would have automatically flagged a federal alert. It's called structuring. Derek wrote the word on a notepad and slid it across to me. Structuring. Federal crime, independent of the theft itself. He'd been watching the pattern for nearly a year before he brought it to Renata. He'd run it by a colleague in his compliance department who confirmed what he was seeing. Then he went to a private consultation with an elder law attorney named Barbara Foss, who had an office on McCallie Avenue. She confirmed it again. Then he built the file. Page by page he showed me. 21 months of withdrawals, documented in a grid with dates, amounts, and the account the money landed in, a personal account in Philippa's name at a different bank. A total of $302,000. Drawn off, careful and patient, like water through a slow leak in a wall you can't find until the ceiling starts to bow. Then the pension. Philippa had gone to my retirement plan administrator with the power of attorney documents, the ones I'd signed at the kitchen table on the night I was too worn down to read them, and requested that my monthly pension payment be redirected to a secondary account. The administrator processed it without question. Why wouldn't they? The paperwork was immaculate. My daughter had a gift for paperwork. I had not seen a pension payment in 14 months. I didn't know. Philippa handled the money. That was the arrangement. Then the mailing address. She'd filed a change of address form on my retirement account, moved the paper statements to a P.O. box she'd opened in Chattanooga without telling me. The statements stopped coming. I never noticed. I was up at 4:45 every morning making sure Dorothy's pill was ready, and I never once wondered why I hadn't seen a bank statement. Derek slid the next page across slowly. The way you move something fragile? It was Dorothy's account. Dorothy had kept her own savings account since before I knew her. A teacher's account built over decades on $30 deposits and Christmas money and the occasional small bonus, the kind of money you save so carefully it starts to feel like a living thing, like it has weight and warmth and history. She'd never touched the principal. She told me once it was her personal solid ground, something that was just hers, that no one had given her and no one could take. Emptied. 6 weeks ago, Philippa had used the healthcare power of attorney, the one that gave her authority over Dorothy's affairs, to access the account on a day when Dorothy was having what the doctors call a low-function episode, a bad stretch where she was confused and frightened and not able to hold a thought for more than a minute. The bank's record showed the transaction was processed at 2:17 in the afternoon. Dorothy wouldn't have known her own account number that day, let alone what was being done with it. I put both palms flat on Derek's desk, just held them there, stared at the wood grain. "There's one more thing," Derek said. His voice was careful. "This is the part that decided everything for me in terms of timing." He told me about the conversations. Over the past 8 months, Philippa had been having quiet, worried conversations with various members of the extended family. At Easter, with my sister's family. At a cousin's birthday party. After church with an old neighbor of ours from Fraser Avenue. Always the same script, always soft and concerned. "Dad's really struggling. His memory is getting bad. I'm worried he can't manage things the way he thinks he can. I've had to step in more than anyone outside the immediate family realizes." The elder law attorney Barbara Foss recognized the architecture of it immediately when Derek described it to her. Philippa was laying the foundation for a conservatorship petition. If she could establish, through family testimony, through a court-appointed evaluation, through a paper trail of concerned remarks made to the right people at the right times, that I was mentally incapable of managing my own affairs, she could petition a court to name herself my legal guardian. Once that happened, every account I had left, every asset, every decision about Dorothy's care, all of it would pass into her court-supervised legal control. And everything she'd already taken would become nearly impossible to unravel, because the guardian would be controlling the investigation. She wasn't only stealing from me, she was building a wall around me, one quiet, caring, worried comment at a time, to make sure I could never climb back out. I sat in that chair in Derek's office on a Sunday evening with $9,000 to my name, and I thought about Dorothy, about the facility on Hickson Pike, about what happened to someone like Dorothy when the money ran out and the family the court had appointed to protect her was the one who had taken it. I thought about Dorothy reaching across the dinner table an hour ago to squeeze my hand just because. I thought about her in the blue cardigan. Derek looked at me. "What do you want to do, Gerald?" Here's what I've learned in 74 years about the difference between the man I was at 30 and the man I am now. The man at 30 would have driven back to that house and said every word in his chest at full volume, right there at the table with the brisket still warm and the kids down the hall. He would have been a fire, and the fire would have felt righteous for about 3 minutes, and then it would have burned down everything else too, including whatever legal case still existed, including whatever chance there was of getting any of Dorothy's money back. I thought about Dorothy reaching for my hand. "I want every door locked before she knows one is open," I said. "Dorothy first, everything else after." Derek nodded. He already had a plan. He'd had one for 3.5 months. Monday morning at 8 o'clock, I was at Barbara Foss's office on McCallie Avenue. She went through Derek's file the way a surgeon reads an X-ray, not looking for what was there, looking for what shouldn't be. By 11 o'clock that morning, both power of attorney documents Philippa held over Dorothy and over me were formally revoked, filed with the county, effective immediately, and retroactive to that morning's date. Philippa lost all legal authority to touch either account before she sat down to her Monday lunch in Nashville. She had no idea. Barbara filed emergency proceedings to reverse the beneficiary designations that Philippa had quietly altered, buried in a stack of routine paperwork she'd handed me on a morning 18 months ago when I was trying to get Dorothy dressed for a 9:00 appointment and couldn't find her other shoe. Those changes removed Renata and her children from my retirement account and replaced them with Philippa. Barbara reversed them. Renata and the kids were restored. Philippa was removed. She still had no idea. Derek's compliance file went to a detective in the Financial Crimes Unit of the Chattanooga Police Department, a woman named Sergeant Vickers, who told Derek over the phone, when he delivered the physical file to her, that in 12 years of financial crimes work, she had never received a case this thoroughly documented from a private citizen. She said it twice. Derek thanked her and came home and didn't tell me until later, which is exactly who Derek is. 3 days after our Sunday, Philippa called to check in. She asked how Dorothy was doing. She asked how I was feeling. She mentioned she'd been thinking about driving down the following weekend. I told her that would be wonderful. I told her Renata was planning a family dinner, that it would be nice to have everyone together. Dorothy was having a good stretch, and I wanted Philippa to see her on a good day. "How are the accounts looking?" I asked, just to see. "Perfectly fine," she said, warm and easy. "I've got everything handled, don't worry about a thing." "That's such a relief," I said. I don't know what I'd do without you. She arrived on a Saturday evening with a bottle of good wine and a dessert she'd picked up from a bakery in Nashville, the kind of gesture a person makes when they are absolutely certain the ground is solid under their feet. Renata had set the table with the good dishes. Dorothy was in the blue cardigan again. It's the one I always reach for on the evenings. I need to feel like everything is still all right. She was having a wonderful evening. She knew every name at the table. She told a story from 1994 that made Renata laugh so hard she covered her face with her napkin. She held Philippa's hand and patted it twice. Philippa poured wine with her easy, filling the room energy. She told a story. She laughed at her own punchline. She was every inch the devoted daughter, the capable stepdaughter, the woman who had everything managed so you didn't have to worry, seated at my table, drinking my wine, in the house that Dorothy picked out in 1992 and called home. Then there was a knock at the front door. I stood up. I walked through my own house on my own floors, through 38 years of the life Dorothy and I had built together, and I opened the door. Two plainclothes detectives, calm and unhurried, Sergeant Vickers and her partner, paperwork in hand. I had spoken with them twice that week. They knew exactly where they were going. I heard Philippa stop talking mid-sentence. I stepped aside. The detectives came in. I watched my stepdaughter's face at the exact moment she understood what was happening. And I will say this, because I promised myself I would tell this true and not just easy. There was no remorse on her face first. Not at first. What happened first was that her eyes moved fast, intelligent, practiced around the room. Me, Derek, Renata, the door, the windows, looking for the exit, finding none. Renata stood up slowly. She had spent 4 days deciding what she wanted to say and had cut it down to almost nothing, the way you do when you finally understand that the most important things don't need many words. She said, "I need you to look at Mom before you leave." The room went still. Even the detectives paused. Philippa looked at Dorothy. Dorothy looked back at her stepdaughter with the clearest, warmest expression she had worn all evening. She didn't understand what was happening in the room. What she understood was that Philippa seemed to be preparing to leave, and Dorothy wasn't ready for the evening to be over, because it had been such a nice one. She lifted her hand and waved it slow and gentle, the way you wave at someone you love who is already too far down the road to hear you call after them. "Don't go yet, sweetheart," Dorothy said softly. "We're having such a lovely time." No one at that table said a word. I want you to understand what happened in that silence, because it matters more than anything else I've told you tonight. Dorothy's illness, the same disease that had taken her street names and her grandchildren's names, and sometimes my name, was the only thing in that room that couldn't be planned for, couldn't be countered, couldn't be strategized around. It protected Philippa from ever having to see Dorothy's face understand. Whatever was left of Dorothy's mind would carry Philippa's name clean and warm through the rest of her life, no matter what came next. She would never earn that mercy. She would never lose it either. Renata spoke again, quiet and clear and without wavering. "She'll love you to the end," she said. "Her mind will keep you safe from ever having to watch her figure out what you did. You'll never have to earn it back. But I know what you did. Dad knows. Derek knows. And I am going to spend every year I have left making sure both of them are okay, not because I have to, because that's what it actually looks like to show up for family." They walked Philippa out the front door of our house on a quiet Saturday evening. Dorothy watched her go and waved again from her chair, cheerful and sweet and entirely at peace, believing with everything she had left that her daughter was just heading home after a lovely dinner the way she always did. Philippa pleaded guilty. The file Derek built left no room: elder financial abuse, criminal fraud, federal structuring charges. Restitution was ordered, and it comes back in pieces, slowly, the way it was taken. Some of it is gone for good. I've made my peace with that, or I'm making it. Some days that's the most a man can do. Dorothy's care is protected. Barbara Foss found legal pathways I didn't know existed, emergency planning instruments and veteran benefit structures I'd never heard of, that could shelter her care, even with the account as damaged as it was. The facility on Hickson Pike is still within reach. Dorothy is going to be all right. Not the version of all right we planned for, but all right. And right now, all right is the whole world to me. Here is what I would hand across the table to you if I could. The person who takes everything from you almost never looks like a threat. They look like help. They look like competence. They look like someone who showed up exactly when you were too tired to stay standing on your own. And the mistake most of us make, the one I made, is believing that being exhausted is a good enough reason to stop reading what you sign. It isn't. Not for any reason. Not ever. So before you close this tonight and move on with your evening, I want you to do one thing. If there is anyone managing your accounts, your documents, your monthly payments, even someone you would swear your life on, set up a way to see your own balances with your own eyes, on your own phone, under your own password, that no other living person controls. Not because you don't trust them, because trust and verification were never supposed to be enemies. They were always supposed to work together. I just forgot that for 22 months. Now, I want to hear from you, because I read every one of these. Type a 1 in the comments if you believe I did right by going the quiet, legal road instead of confronting her at that dinner table. Type a 2 if you would have needed to look her in the eye and say every word out loud right then and there. No judgment. I understand it. Type a 3 if you honestly don't know what you would have done in my shoes, because that is the most honest answer of all, and the one I respect most. And tell me where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is where you are. I love knowing how far these stories travel. If someone you trusted has ever turned that trust into a weapon against you, tell me. You will not be the only one in that comment section, not by a long way. And if this story reached something in you, if it gave you something to think about, something to check, something to share with someone you love, do an old man one small kindness and hit that like button and subscribe. There are more stories here. Real ones, hard ones, and a few that end better than anyone expected. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you for being here, truly.